Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kayla and it's time to crack into a good book. So today's video is going to be another recent reads wrap up for books 11 through 20 that I read in July. Overall, this was a better batch of books than the first 10 books I guess that I read in July. There are a lot more books that I really loved, so that's exciting. And of course, one of them, it was like my most anticipated book of the year, so no one is surprised there. Like always, oh yes, thank you. This is helpful. This is very helpful. So like always, we will start at the lowest rated and work our way up. I only have one 3-star book to talk to you about today, and that's The Book of Second Chances by Katherine Slee. So I got this, I think, in one of the unplugged book boxes, but this is a contemporary where Emily's famous grandmother, who is a children's book author, dies, and this grandma essentially sends Emily on a quest around Europe to search for this like lost manuscript of this children's series. And so Emily, thank you, Samus. Emily is retracing her grandma's past and like learns more about herself and her family. So this was pretty decent. Contemporaries, I think, are kind of hit or miss for me, and this was like, I mean, it was fine. Like, I didn't hate it, so that's good. Each chapter was framed around a different bird, which I thought was really interesting, and it was, you know, fun to see how each bird related to each chapter. So that was like an interesting, I guess, mechanism. I liked how Emily finds herself in this story. She is initially in a car accident with her parents when she's younger, where her parents died and she was very injured. This kind of, I think, left her with a bit of a speech impediment, or like she's definitely got a scar on her face. It wasn't exactly clear like what had happened. I think she had been kind of taking, I think, the easy way out by like not really trying to do things and like was relying on her grandma. So this trip turns out to be really good for her. So I liked, you know, learning more and just like following Emily's journey, as well as just learning more about her grandma. It was fine, but that's about it. There's some content warnings for parental death and this injury that I've kind of mentioned. So, I mean, to summarize, I think this was an easy read, but it just wasn't super memorable for me. Then we have a 3.5-star book, and that's His and Hers by Alice Feeney. So I think this actually comes out July 28th, and I had won an advanced copy through a giveaway. So this is a thriller where it's basically like there's two sides to each story, you know, like yours and mine, ours and theirs, his and hers, and someone's always lying. So we have Anna, who is a BBC presenter, and she's like finally achieves this job, and basically this dream job ends up being threatened, and she is sent out to cover a murder that has happened in her hometown, and the victim turns out to be one of her childhood friends. And then our other character, Jack, is an investigator and is obviously investigating this murder. It turns out he knows the victim. I thought this was a pretty good thriller overall, and I did prefer this to, I've read Sometimes I Lie by this author before, and I think I liked this one more. So it definitely had unexpected parts to it. I thought I knew where it was going, but it turns out, no, I did not. Both of our narrators are definitely unreliable, and there is a bit of this trope of like one of the main characters drinking a bit excessively. I don't think this was done like as much, I guess, as I've seen it in other books, so I wasn't as bothered by that as I am in other books, but that's like still just not one of my favorite tropes that has recently started happening more, I guess, in thrillers. I think Anna and Jack are not particularly likable, or really anyone in the story is particularly likable, but I do feel bad for them, certainly. The plot is pretty decently paced, I thought. There's kind of like some slower, kind of like meh parts at the beginning, but I definitely got drawn into it as, you know, the plot thickens and you get more invested in this murder case. Kind of mentioned, I didn't expect the like connection and like paths that took to get to the end. There's some content warnings here for sure, though. There's got abuse, rape, bullying, like sudden infant death syndrome, animal cruelty, blackmail, and child pornography, kind of. So there's a whole bunch of darker subjects that are mentioned about him here, so do be aware. Now we'll move to the 4-star books. So the first book I'll talk about here is Kindred by Octavia Butler. So this is my first Octavia Butler book, and I really enjoyed it, and definitely would be interested in reading more of her books. So this follows Dana, and this takes place in, I think, 1976, and she is a modern black woman who is celebrating her 26th birthday with her husband, and then suddenly she's transported to antebellum Maryland to save Rufus, who is the white son of a plantation owner. And so essentially she's repeatedly drawn back in time, and each time like she's in the past, the stay is longer and more dangerous. So this was really fantastic, but it is definitely heavy. Like, man, it was heartbreaking watching Dana's story as she, obviously, not only is it difficult for her to be drawn back into the past over and over again, but just like the experiences that she has to go through while in the past are obviously horrendous. There's certainly like no real explanation as to why it's happening, but like that was fine, I think, for me. There's obviously some content warnings here for abuse, rape, and slavery. It really felt like we were actually there in that time suffering with her. So like obviously that means that the writing was done incredibly well. This is obviously like examining racism and slavery, and I think it kind of asks us if we can change our beliefs, and examines how easy it is to like fall into certain patterns of thinking. Dana was an amazing main character. She's super strong, very resilient, and I just like admired her ability to deal with everything that is happening to her. Definitely felt for her for all the stuff that she has to go through, and I support her actions. Rufus, I hoped for better, but I'm not particularly surprised, I guess, where the story went with him. Kevin, Dana's husband, I thought their relationship was really interesting, and I'm like kind of wondering what will happen to them after the events of this book, and like, there's not a sequel to this, so I will just be forever left contemplating what may happen with them. This is definitely worth reading, and I'm very interested in trying more of Octavia Butler's work. The next 4-star book I'll talk about is A Bad Day for Sunshine by Darynda Jones. So Darynda Jones wrote the Charlie Davidson series, which I've talked about before on my channel. It's a really funny paranormal romance series about the Grim Reaper. So this is the start to a new series, and this is more of a like murder mystery thriller type. But there were a couple of like supernatural things introduced, but it wasn't as much of the focus as it is in like the Charlie Davidson series. So this is set in New Mexico, and our main character, Sunshine, returns home to be the sheriff of this town, and her parents have basically nominated her to be the sheriff, and she kind of expects that this is going to be a pretty mellow job. So she ends up having to deal with a missing teenage girl, a kidnapper on the loose, things about Sunshine's past are coming back up, her daughter's having trouble at school, and then we also have a kidnapped prize-winning rooster named Puff Daddy. So that was kind of fun. But there's certainly some darker moments here than I expected. There's content warnings for rape, kidnapping, a suicide attempt, bullying, and abuse. But aside from that, like, we definitely get more of this like really snarky, hilarious writing of Darynda Jones. Like, I really enjoy her writing. I think it's just highly entertaining. I will say, like, compared to Charlie Davidson, I do think Sunshine and her daughter Ori are a bit more serious and level-headed than Charlie. And I think there were actually some references to Charlie and like some supernatural elements here, so I definitely loved that. The plot, I felt like it was a little bit disjointed at times. Like, it would suddenly skip locations, and I'm not exactly sure if I just like missed what happened, but it seems like, I don't know, some of the transitions were a little bit unclear to me, and I'm also not completely clear on the love interest in this book. I also did feel a little bit confused with some of the minor side characters, just like keeping everybody straight. But that being said, I do think Sunshine and her daughter are both great point of view characters. Ori, I felt so bad for her getting bullied at school, but I really liked watching this just getting to see this relationship between her and Sunshine. So Sun is like, I'm definitely really interested in learning more about her background. We get some hints about like what has happened in her past, but I want more concrete answers, I guess. And she certainly seems like a really competent person, and I'm glad that, she's elected as the sheriff. Like, I think this is going to be the start to a really fun series. Darynda Jones has some characters in her series, like the Charlie Davidson series has this as well, but, obviously this comes up in here too. But some of the characters are deaf, and there's sign language that's pretty frequently used throughout the book. So I think that's a really cool aspect. Definitely, like, reading it made me miss the Southwest. So yeah, if you're looking for a good thriller and everything that I said sounds interesting, I would definitely check this out. I want to keep going with the series for sure. The next 4-star book I'll talk about is Break the Fall by Jennifer Iacopelli. So this is a YA contemporary about Olympic gymnastics. That was fun. Our main character, Audrey, is recovering from having spinal surgery a year before the events of this book. So she has made the U.S. gymnastics team along with her best friend. Then their coach is arrested because of sexual assault charges, kind of like what has happened in real world gymnastics. Some of the teammates of the girl who was being abused kind of don't believe her. And so then we also have a new coach with a cute son. So Audrey is obviously like training to still compete at the Olympics. So this was really fantastic. I love that it was set at the Olympics. Like, obviously love the Olympics, and I thought it was appropriate to read during my Read the Olympics readathon. We certainly have some of these competition parts, and I can, like, the writing, like, while I don't fully know some of the terminology, like, I can imagine it happening, so I think that was really well done. There's obviously trigger warnings here for sexual assault and people not believing the victims. I thought Audrey was a great protagonist. I really rooted for her. She's very strong. She's obviously pushing through this injury and kind of this emotional trauma to compete at this really high level. You know, I kind of mentioned some of the characters don't really believe the victim, but we also do have characters who are showing solidarity with the victim and believing her. It's certainly tough to read about. We do have a lot of representation here with the characters, which was nice. A lot of our characters are, like, several of them are biracial, some of them are black. Audrey is, I think, half Korean. And yeah, I mean, it was just really great to see diversity here. So it was a quick read. I thought it made me miss the Olympics. It was really enjoyable, and I would definitely recommend this. The last 4-star book I'll talk about is Friday Night Bites by Chloe Neill. So this is the second book in the Chicagoland Vampire series, and this is an urban fantasy series about vampires. So in this world, vampires have come out to the world, and our main character, Merritt, must reconnect with her upper-class family and kind of work with other supernaturals to keep some of the not so great aspects of the vampire lifestyle out of the media. But somebody wants to start a fight, basically, and is kind of like engineering some drama. So this was pretty good. I don't think it was quite what I expected based on the synopsis. Like, I thought it would focus more on these raves, which is like basically these mass feeding parties where vampires round up humans like cattle and drink themselves silly. So that's like definitely what it says on the back of the book, and like that kind of comes up in passing, but it's not as much the focus here as I thought it might be. We do get more about Merritt training and obviously like trying to uncover this plot that's happening. So I thought Merritt was still pretty interesting and funny, and I liked the new developments that we get here with her character and like vampiric nature. We do get more exploration of the various supernaturals in this world, like the sorcerers and werewolves, and obviously the vampires. So most of this book, I think, was focused on Merritt training, and there's definitely some tension with Ethan, who is the head of her house, and Morgan, who is another head of one of these other vampire houses. It's a little bit of a love triangle, and I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen there, but as far as love triangles go, like, I don't think this is as like egregious as some of the other ones that I've seen before. I don't think it was quite as just in terms of the plot, I don't think that this was quite as action-packed or engaging as the first book, but I do still want to continue. So yeah, it's a fun vampire urban fantasy series if that's what you're looking for. I have one 4.5-star book to talk to you about today, and that's The Mortal Word by Genevieve Cogman. So I think this is book 5 in the Invisible Library series, and this is kind of, I think, an urban fantasy series where, like, you've got a whole bunch of alternate worlds, and there's this library that is trying to collect unique works of, like, unique written works from some of these different worlds, and then you've got, like, some dragons and some fae, so it's a whole bunch of really great stuff. This particular plot, Irene, one of our main characters, must go with Vale, who is, he's kind of introduced, I think, in the first book, but he's kind of like a Sherlock Holmes of his particular world. So they have to go to 1890s Paris to investigate the murder of a dragon at this Dragon Fae peace conference. So along the way, they uncover evidence that the library might be involved, and some librarians are being held as hostage to ensure that this peace conference goes well, including Irene's parents. So this was great. I don't think this was my favorite of the books that I've read so far. I like this idea of this library and alternate worlds. I don't know if it necessarily felt like we were in 1890s Paris, but, like, again, it's kind of an alternate world, so, like, who knows what an alternate 1890s Paris might feel like, but yeah. So we do get some interesting new fae here, and I really liked that. It's pretty creepy, alarming, and also awesome. So that was fun. We definitely have a lot of schemes and politics, as well as, like, you know, formalities to deal with. I continue to like our main characters, Irene, Kai, and Vale. Irene, I think, is kind of a no-nonsense type character, but I really like how intelligent she is and like watching her use the language, which is this like, I don't know, powerful language that the librarians can use to like kind of manipulate the world. It's a kind of a form of magic, but it uses like very precise language, which I think is really interesting. So it's fun to see her use the language to get out of various situations, and I think she's really funny. I think she has more of like a dry wit, so that particular type of humor may not work for everybody. Vale, like I mentioned, is kind of like Sherlock, and I did enjoy seeing him investigate this murder. And then Kai, I think, wasn't as involved with this particular plot as he is in some of the other books, but I still think that he's cool. I did not expect the results of the investigation, and I'm very interested to see what happens next. Overall, I think that this book has introduced us to some possible political ramifications in future books, so I'm very intrigued to see what happens there. So, yeah, I mean, while this, I think, wasn't my favorite book in the series, like I said, I still am definitely going to keep reading this series. So now we get into our 5-star book range, and the first book I'll talk about here is Stranger Planet by Nathan W. Pyle. So this is just like a little fun comic book. I think it's a collection of some of the posts that have been on Instagram, as well as some like, I don't know, book exclusive comics, but this is essentially just like aliens encountering what all do we have? Melodies, traditions, pets, and unpredictable behavior, fear, pain, and geography. I think that these comics are really adorable and just really funny. I enjoy seeing how how the aliens talk and just like how they refer to everyday things. It's just really entertaining. I think, you know, it's the panels aren't particularly long and you can like easily read these comics very quickly. So this is definitely like a fun mood brightener, and I loved it. The next 5-star book I'll talk about is The Light Brigade by Kameron Hurley. So this is the first Kameron Hurley book that I've read, and I obviously really loved it, so I definitely want to check out more books. So this is an adult sci-fi. I think it's military sci-fi, but like on the lighter side of military sci-fi. Basically, we have our grunts who are busted down into light to travel to interplanetary battlefronts. However, some don't come back quite right. You know, they're kind of like, we must stick to the mission brief no matter what. So we follow our main character experiencing these drops that don't quite sync up with the rest of the platoon's drops, and you know, our main character learns that maybe the war isn't exactly what the corporations say it is. And it's like, you know, is this madness, or is our main character like actually experiencing this? So this was so good. I like just absolutely loved it. It's super fast paced. I just needed to know what was going on. I just like flew through it. We obviously have some time craziness happening, and I'm kind of tempted to reread this to fully experience it and like pick up on more clues now that like I've read it and like kind of know where everything fits in this timeline. I do feel bad for our main character. That's obviously going to be a very confusing situation to be in. Sympathized with our main character quite a bit. Like, I can't even imagine what that would be like. The war itself is pretty horrific, and I do think there were some gruesome scenes that kind of come up, so I guess some content warnings for that. But I really liked this idea of this light travel. It's just so crazy and really quite terrifying to just like think about the different ways that this can go wrong when you're like breaking people down into light and then like transporting them and like, you know, rebuilding them. So many ways it can go wrong. But yeah, I feel like this is one where you kind of have to pay attention just because of the nature of this book, but it's very easy to do that, and yeah, definitely recommend this. This was just absolutely fantastic. And finally, to no one's surprise, my last 5-star book I'll talk about is Peace Talks by Jim Butcher. Yeah, I mean, I read this like immediately when it arrived. It did not take me long to get through, which is like simultaneously good and bad. Like, you know, now I have to wait until Battleground, but at least that comes out in September. But anyway, this was fantastic. This is, I think, the 16th book in the Dresden Files series, which is an urban fantasy series about a wizard in Chicago. It's definitely, I think, my favorite series. I think it just has like such a fun, sarcastic tone, and just like the humor works so well for me. This particular book, we've got some peace talks happening between various supernatural nations of the world. Our main character, Harry Dresden, is on the White Council security team. We have essentially like family issues and political manipulation going on here. So that's all I'll say about that, since it is the 16th book in the series, but this was just so damn good. Obviously fast paced, we've got a lot of stuff going on here, and like I've talked to several friends and being like, okay, so what do you think about this? Like, let's form theories about that. What do you think is going to happen next? Oh god, it's so good. It's basically like, I need to know what's going to happen. I need Battleground right now. Harry continues to be just absolutely fantastic. I think he's sarcastic and just really funny. I like seeing him interact with his family, though some of the interactions were a little bit heartbreaking. I love this world so much, and just like the side characters and the creatures that we get are just all great. We have some minor side characters who are returning from previous books and some of the short stories, so that was just really fun to see. There's actually, like, I thought this was kind of funny. There was a reference to Overwatch in here. I don't know if anyone plays Overwatch, but I have before, and I thought that was just entertaining here. We definitely have a lot of new and interesting plot threads introduced here, and I feel like this is kind of setting us up for the end game, and I'm just like super interested in seeing what's going on here. Like, I think a lot of the plot threads don't really get resolved in this book, but I think that's because Peace Talks and Battleground were initially supposed to be just one book, but they split it up because I think it was like, you know, the cost to produce such a large book would be insane or something. So they split it up into 2 books, but that's kind of why I think the plot threads weren't really wrapped up here. But anyway, you know, I'm super excited for Battleground. I could just continue to gush on about how much I love the Dresden Files, but definitely recommend this, obviously. There's dog hair flying everywhere. Anyway, those are the 10 books I have to talk to you about today. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books or think you might pick them up. And for your question of the day, let's just say, have you ever seen any of these Strange Planet comics? I think they're just absolutely funny. And I follow Nathan W. Pyle on Instagram, so they're always just so super cute. But anyway, rambling about that again. So I hope you're having an excellent day and are reading something awesome. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up, as that would certainly help me out. But with that, I think we're going to wrap it up here and see you in the next one.